resources out there.
The talking points are very clear. I'd actually like to ask all of you, pardon the pun, to drill down on this one a little bit, because it's so important. I actually think Americans get it at some level. It's about new technologies and new businesses and the future of American competitiveness. It's about maintaining and growing a manufacturing base and owning a new sector and the next sector, as well as powering the planet. It's about maintaining our wildlife and our natural resources and having control. As we'll talk about later, it's about national security. All this stuff is out there. Maybe the question is, how do you, if you're really going to have a grassroots movement, if you're not just going to inform people, but get them to be actively engaged, what are you asking them to do? How do you make that next leap from knowledge to action? Any thoughts about that?
Well, in some way you have to make it personal. And in Louisiana, we saw a huge jump in my company's sales once people realized that the oil spill is going to directly affect their lives. So to communicate that message, you have to make it personal. Talk about climate change. How is that going to affect the area in which you live in? I think that if we communicate it in that way, that absolutely you'll take that next step.
What are your thoughts on that, taking it to that next level? You have an infrastructure with a union. You actually have a mechanism to do that,
right.
But not everybody does.
Right. 20,000 letters into our two senators from Ohio, from union members, explaining what they do and how they do it and how they see this can be a job retainer and a job creator. Phone calls, engaging not only just our members, but where they worship, where they grocery shop, letting people know that this is about jobs for us.
What effect has the oil spill had in South Dakota?
On some of our migratory birds, that's where they end up. They end up on that Gulf Coast. That's where a lot of them winter. Otherwise, we're about as far from an ocean as humanly possible in the middle of the state of South Dakota. But it's still important.
It's a great state.
Yeah. But we don't have a lot of ocean shoreline. We have a nice Missouri River system. But I think the biggest thing that is likely to affect South Dakota is some of the energy resources, some of the wind energy resources. We have some of the highest potential wind energy resources. And if some of these bills pass that include funding for grids and things like that, I think it's going to be very beneficial to the state of South Dakota. But I think the main impact is, again, we've got to stop the bleeding first, and then work on solutions.
Beck, we're going to just one more question, then we're going to wrap up. In this proposed bill, there's more money, more subsidies for renewable energy. What, as a guy who's working with this technology, what kind of trajectory do you see it on in terms of cost coming down, appealing to a wider audience, something that is more marketable?
Obviously, if we're producing more, and one thing that I think that we really need to do in the United States is up our production of silicon-based panels here in the United States. We have a few companies that are doing a great job, but with those subsidies will come American jobs in the manufacturing industry, and with those subsidies, we'll have we'll see the costs come down. On a personal level, we'll see many stories similar to some of the ones that I've seen when hiring someone completely change their situation, and that's actually how I came here today, is because I was invited by Heather, who was put in touch with me by my employee that I hired about 2 months ago, I believe. And he moved down here to New Orleans from Missouri. He had a home that was in foreclosure. He got a job in New Orleans, and it's completely turned around his situation, and we're going to see a lot more of that.
Okay, do we have some time for audience questions here? Or is the senator about to walk in? I think they're walking out. I'll keep going then. Do we have time for some audience questions? Yes? A couple minutes for audience questions? We'll wrap up. Okay, we'll come to you for questions later, I promise. Last question, though, to Lee. You got to just, okay, reassure me on this. So I went not long ago to the National Renewable Energy Labs, and I was looking at all the different technologies they're working on. including these gigantic, beautiful windmills. And I'm walking down with their chief engineer and researcher, and I said, God, this thing is huge. This is great. Where's it come from? Brazil, he told me. Promise me that these are going to get made in this country.
We're going to do everything we can to make that promise come true.
Want to thank the panel. Thank you very much. I'd like to bring up our next panel. So a round of applause, please.
Indiana.